Not gonna lie, I was nervous for a minute, but the Jaguars had a good night and got a really, really good player in Brian Thomas Jr. I'll break that down and tell you what they need to do next here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, day one is in the books, and we are here to talk about it here on Locked On Jaguars. I'm the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, Tony Wiggins, and here we like to say it's your team every day, and we always thank you for making us your first listen. Reminder that we're free to subscribe to on our YouTube page. Make sure you go over there, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and also the bell so you get notifications each and every time we drop an episode. And then wherever you listen to your audio podcast, make sure you tap into that location every day so you do not miss an episode of Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Shout out to the everydayers for joining us here every single day. We absolutely appreciate you. And you know, this brother, I keep running into him. I ran into him last night, and I had run into him in the grocery store, and he keeps telling me I'm an everydayer. I'm the guy that you saw in the store. And I keep forgetting his name, and I just forgot it again. Next time I'm gonna write it down, but he caught me while I was in the middle of working last night. But very, very delightful, brother. You know who you are. The next time you see me, just remind me once again what your name is. Good night for the Jaguars. Really, really good night for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Brian Thomas Jr. was he doesn't know this, but he was a friend of the show. He was a friend of the show for a while because he was one of the first people that we profiled when we started looking at prospects and we knew where exactly the Jaguars were picking. In fact, I was online a few times with colleagues trying to convince them, and I normally don't do that to try to convince them of a prospect, but a couple of months back, I was like, hey, man, you ain't on the train yet because he's a real, real good player. So we're going to be able to break that down a little bit. Weaponizing Trevor in segment 2, why that is so important and why that is mission accomplished right now. And I know I'm giving Trent Baalke all his love. Y'all wonder what's up with that. No, it's just I've always been fair and honest, saying that I'll criticize when I need to criticize and when I think I need to criticize. And when I think I need to praise, I'll do that. And right now I'm praising. What to watch for coming up next in segment 3. What to watch for in day 2 and day 3. So let's break down the Brian Thomas Jr. deal. The board was really in favor of the Jaguars leading up to 17. 6 quarterbacks had gone. 6 quarterbacks had gone. I thought it was going to be 4 at that point. I felt maybe one more would go later, but 6 went. And then there was a run on the offensive linemen and the offensive tackles. Those guys, the Jaguars are actually right in the middle of that, and they decided to go in another direction. Isn't it nice to get all your questions answered? All of your questions answered, like what are they prioritizing? What are they thinking? So this whole time, when they had a chance to get the corner that they wanted, they had a chance to get an offensive lineman that they wanted, they had a chance to get any defensive tackle, interior defensive tackle they wanted, and I do believe they had a chance to get a really, really good pass rusher. The Jaguars showed you what their priority was. Their priority was weaponizing Trevor. Their priority was adding speed to this offense. That priority changed when Calvin Ridley did not stay a member of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trent Baalke was asked last night after the pick. He was flat out asked. I asked him if moving back from 17 to 23, getting extra pick 167, which is a 5th, a 3rd, and a 4th. And, you know, I was just thinking, like, a lot of people are praising him for doing that, for getting what is a 2nd round value. When you add all of that stuff up, it's a 2nd round value. It's a 3rd, 4th, and a 5th. It comes to like a late 2nd round value for just going back 6 spaces. They took a chance and they did it. I probably wouldn't have done it because that's a scary proposition to think that you really want this dude that you would have taken at 17, which he told me and he told all of us based on the question that I asked. He said he would have been the pick at 17. And they knew they wanted, they knew they had their guy. They took a chance on their ability to assess what other teams were going to do and their intel based on what other teams were leaning toward. And they bounced back. They went back and still got their guy. In fact, I'm going to share some inside trade secrets with y'all. We were in the media room. The draft party was in the stadium. We were actually in the practice facility meeting room. When the team in front of the Jaguars picked at 22, on TV, the pick had not been put up yet. In fact, the clock was still running. One of the Jaguars PR people came in and started passing out literature. It was Brian Thomas Jr.'s bio. Now, we had already gotten wind that that's who they were going to take. We didn't get it from inside of the building. We got it from what's Pretty Ricky. Pretty Ricky, he was on fire all night, right? So we were sitting there looking at him and Albert Breer. So we were getting the picks like 4 or 5 minutes earlier than a lot of people. And right at the time we heard that they were going to take Brian Thomas Jr. at 23, here comes the PR staff about 3 or 4 minutes before it's even announced that the pick is in, passing us out Brian Thomas Jr. stuff. So I believe them when they say that that's who they were going after. I absolutely believe them. And I believe them. They would have taken him at 17, but they decided to move back. And that's the game within the game that sometimes I think isn't worth it. I think it's just best to get the dudes you want more than anybody else. But I think probably around at that time that there were people who, there were multiple ways that they could have gone with that pick. But this was obviously, so people kind of make fun of the fact that they go, how is he your main guy on your board, but you moved down? That's what happens in the draft. That's what happens. You take those risks. You take those chances. It's almost like the stock market, man. And you have contingency actions and you have backup plans. But fortunately, the Jaguars didn't have to use one. What are they getting in Brian Thomas Jr.? 6'4", according to their listing, 6'4", right at 210 pounds. If I have one more person tell me that he reminds them of DJ Chark, I'm gonna go crazy. The only thing that reminds me of DJ Chark is the fact that they wore the same uniform in college, and they're similar in size. But if you saw DJ Chark close up and you see Brian Thomas Jr., you'd recognize that even though the measurements say they're only 1 inch apart and maybe 12 pounds apart, it's a little bit more than that. DJ was really thin built in his legs, and Brian isn't like that. And when you watch them play, he was a 5-star recruit for a reason. He is he has great body control. I think he's a stronger player. DJ used to get knocked off his line a little bit. And a lot of people didn't even know that until the wide receiver coach by trade, Urban Meyer, came in here and challenged him and was holding him after practice. It turns out he wasn't as good as everybody thought. Urban wasn't wrong about everything, okay? This kid is not DJ Chark. The whole same uniform, almost the same stature, that doesn't matter in scouting when you really look at the player. Way better body control. I think he's faster than DJ Chark. Plays faster, plays with more functional speed. I think he's stronger, as I've mentioned in the past. And I think he has more of a route tree than DJ Chark does, though. So what they're getting is a tall, long, he is a real high point catcher. He's not just a tall guy. He actually goes up and gets the ball, but just has this stride, man. And I can see him. He's one of my dudes because I always try to project guys to the NFL. And guys that have that gear, that extra gear the way he does, they usually find a nice home in the National Football League. Is there a comp for him? I gave somebody a comp of Chris Henry last night, and people were like, they were too young to remember how good he was because he passed away at an early age. But he has a 6'6" son right now. That's a top 5 recruit in the 2026 class. He's going to Ohio State already. So that just tells you how good Chris Henry was. He was with Chad Ochocinco and TJ Husmanzada back in Cincy, and they thought he was the best receiver on the team. I've heard some stuff like Martavis Bryant. I think he's a stronger player than Martavis Bryant. I've heard George Pickens. He's not George Pickens. He's different from that. Probably, wouldn't necessarily say a little stronger. He might be a little bigger than George and uh, not as enigmatic as George. He kind of is a quiet guy that goes about his business. He had number one wide receiver stats, and he was a number two because they threw the ball so much at LSU. So that's what they're getting in Brian Thomas Jr., big time player, a pick that I am really, really happy with. We have profiled him before here on Locked On Jaguars, and I think he's a really, really good player. If you don't believe me, go back and look at the episode where I talked about Brian Thomas Jr., and I'll tell you exactly what I said about him. I thought he was going to be a big time player. I really do. So the Jags obviously targeted wide receiver 4 as opposed to cornerback 1 or edge 2 or offensive line 6 or 7, whichever one it was, and even defensive tackle 1 or 2. Seattle took Byron Murphy 1 pick ahead of the Jaguars, and the Jaguars passed on Johnny Newton and other stuff. We're going to talk about why they decided to weaponize Trevor in segment 2. I think it's very, very important that they did that. They were either going to weaponize him or protect him. It was one thing or the other, and they decided to do this. And I got a little take on what this means physically for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'll tell you about it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Gotta let y'all know about LinkedIn, man. If you are opening a business or have opened a business and you need help staffing it, and you might not even know you need help, but you do. Trust me, with all those other things you have to deal with, you are in the right place when you're hiring for a small business and you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. You have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to a perfect role in a given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Segment number 2 here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. All right, going into this draft, day 1, we thought the Jaguars had some interesting choices. Could they bolster their defensive line in their front 4 even more and make it, instead of just being one of the top 8 units in the league, like top 25%, make that thing like one of the top 10%? That was an option. Loading up on DBs, because there aren't very many DBs under contract. As we stand today, there are not very many DBs under contract for next season. That was an option. The weaponizing Trevor Lawrence with a big fast catch radius guy who completes that wide receiver room. And it also makes you wonder, if there's something going on with Zay Jones. Maybe he if they're going to keep 6, Devin Duvernay right now is the 6th receiver. So just keep that in mind with whatever that means. And it's still a very deep draft in the wide receiver. They have extra picks now. Who knows? They might touch that room up again. And if they do, then that's fine with me. But that was an alternative. The other alternative was to put more bodyguards around him. And I pointed this out to somebody last night. The Bengals, they already got Orlando Brown Jr., right? And I know they signed the big offensive tackle from Trent Brown. They got Trent Brown. So Zeus is like, what is he, 6'6", 330. And Trent Brown is 6'8", 350. I think they got Mekhi Becton. If I'm not mistaken, they got Mekhi Becton. But even if they didn't, that's already 6'6", 330, 6'6", 335, and then 6'8", 350. And oh, by the way, they went ahead of Amarius Mims at 6'7", 342. So my thing is sometimes you just have to make a decision that you're just going to protect people. And I know my man Gene Fournette pointed out, just because they're big doesn't always work. Yeah, in this case it does. We're not talking about guys that work and guys that don't. We're talking about guys that we know work and then they happen to be real big, and they're getting a whole bunch of them. So they made that conscious choice, but the Jaguars didn't. The Jaguars decided we're going to weaponize Trevor Lawrence. Interesting though that they did. Trent Baalke says probably not. Like if Calvin comes back, they don't look at this player. They move in another direction. So on the surface, you could ask yourself, or should you be alarmed that in two separate seasons, 2 consecutive years, that what they decided to do was replace a young player in his prime. They did it last year by replacing Juwan Taylor with Anton Harrison in the first round. And now they've essentially replaced Calvin Ridley with Brian Thomas Jr. So you're going to ask yourself, is this the elevation wave that you were talking about? No, not necessarily. I do think those departures made it necessary that they tap into the well, but what they're getting is they're getting a bigger receiver for a cheaper price than Brian Thomas Jr. Early 20s, 21, 22 years old, whereas Calvin Ridley is pushing 30. Obviously not as proven. And then with Anton Harrison, you could argue that his season that he had last year was, as a rookie, was on par with the best season Juwan Taylor ever had. And, it's the difference between paying $5 and $6 million in 20. So hopefully they can get some of the same production, or at least some of the same promise, or more promise, because Brian Thomas is a younger player. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. But what I will be concerned about is, when you were wondering what their mindset is, their mindset is we got to give Trevor Lawrence everything he needs to succeed. And when a team goes shopping and they have multiple needs, and they will tell you what they prioritize. And in this situation, the thing that was prioritized was explosive plays on offense, being able to throw the ball down the field. And what they've done, when they made the comment about not being big and physical enough, the right assumption was for us to assume that they were talking about the lines of scrimmage, because they got pushed around in the run game late in the year. And they got pushed around most of the year on the interior of their offensive line. So they added Eric Armstead on the defense, who's a big guy, 6'7", almost 300 pounds. They added Mitch Morse, a veteran. And normally I don't believe in cherry picking 1 or 2 players and thinking you're going to change the complexity of your entire team. In this case, though, they just might do that, to be honest. Of course, with more health and improvement, and then some things that they may do on day 2 and day 3. But don't discount the wide receiver part of that physical nature. And exactly what I mean by that is this. We assumed that they were just talking about the line. How about the fact that Calvin really had some drops last year that a lot of people want to attribute to a lot of time off that he had? But he's also not the biggest guy, like 6'1", 190. He's good at what he does, but that's not his thing. How many times did Jamal Agnew touch the ball and he just wasn't quite tall enough to bring it in, or he had to dive for it, or when he did get it, he got hit and he dropped it and fumbled it, and even if they recovered the ball? How many times did stuff like that happen? How many times did balls even hit Christian Kirk in the hands and they drop? How many times did Zay Jones drop passes? I've even seen Evan Ingram drop passes. So a lot of times those drops too come with just a minimal amount of contact. What you do with Gabe Davis, who's 6'2.5", maybe 6'3", about 215, and Brian Thomas, who's big and long and wiry, I think you get guys who can play through contact a little bit better. I think that adds to the physicality of this team. I think it makes slants easier to throw and hit. That guys will get contact and they'll still be able to run through the contact and catch the ball with people grabbing on their arms. So maybe making the receivers bigger, more physical specimens, more imposing, without sacrificing athleticism and speed, Maybe that was one of a part of the message that the Jaguars were trying to send when they said that they weren't big and physical enough. That all of their receivers, they trying to put them together and they look like the Smurfs. Even the ones that had a little height on them, 6'1", 6'2", with Zay. Zay ain't thick. Well, thick is the wrong word. Let me rephrase that. He's not burly. Okay? So tell that man he ain't thick. He don't want to be thick, but you know what I mean. He's not burly. So yeah, we'll discuss that and discuss what to watch for today in the draft and over the next couple of days. We're gonna take a look at that in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. But first, I have to let you know, if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you're sick and tired of those dudes yelling and screaming, and you got to turn the volume down, even muting your TV, and you can still hear them talking. Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Where do we go from here? If you're a Jaguar fan, I'm going to try to give you some ideas exactly what they'll do. I'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguar. Let me tell you about Monopoly Go, man. If y'all want to have some fun with your family on these weekends and holidays that are coming up, there's no better thing than Monopoly Go. Monopoly is the real deal, man. You know the game, and now there's another twist on it that has been downloaded by over 150 million people and downloaded 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with your friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself. Steal it from your friends. I like that. And the leaderboard show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just about being a competitor. It's about team building with your friends and your family and all the people around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play.
This episode of your favorite Locked On podcast is brought to you by the best meal kit service in the game, Home Chef. No more having to answer the dreaded question, what are we going to do for dinner tonight? Thanks to Home Chef and their chef-designed recipes that are delivered directly to my door, all pre-packaged, pre-portioned. They even peel the garlic cloves for you. And each recipe, one of my favorites, blackened mahi, comes with a full page of easy-to-read instructions that include customization options and pictures to guide you along the way through the step-by-step process so you don't have to ask, is that what chard looks like? I cannot recommend Home Chef enough, especially right now, because for a limited time, Home Chef is giving Locked On listeners 18 free meals, free dessert for life, and of course, free shipping on your first box if you head to homechef.com/lockedon today. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. Yes, you heard that right. Homechef.com/lockedon. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert.
All right, third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. Brian Thomas Jr. adds talent and size and speed to the Jaguars offense. I believe the Jaguars chose consciously to weaponize Trevor Lawrence over choosing some other routes, and I think they'll address those today. So I'm going to give you what to watch for today. What to watch for today is who the best player available is going to be when he gets down to the Jaguars. Now, best player available in need usually have to line up, but as you get further away from the top of the draft, it's probably easier for you to focus on your needs because now you're getting a lot of players that may have equal grades, and the variance between the grades are way harder to read from team to team, as opposed to the first 32 or the first 40 picks. There's a lot of guys that went yesterday that did not surprise people. I'm sure that there's nobody that went yesterday that wasn't on somebody's top 50, right? And I'll even probably go a little bit higher than that and say top 40. There weren't very many trades early on. It wasn't a free-for-all like everyone thought, but there were runs, quarterback runs, 6 quarterbacks in the first 12 picks. I think they went like 14, 15 picks without a defensive player being chosen. There was a run on the offensive lineman, and then there was another run on the second tier wide receivers. Today, I think you're now going to see the football players go, and what I mean by football players, regardless of position, regardless of value. Today is where you see the Edgerrin Coopers and the Peyton Wilsons go. That's going to bode well for the Jaguars because they don't need off-ball linebackers. So hopefully those 2 guys will go. I think Edgerrin Cooper does go pretty early. There are a couple of receivers that are still on the board. Adonai Mitchell, who I did choose in the Locked On Podcast Network Media Mock Draft because the 2 guys I wanted to target, Quinion Mitchell and Brian Thomas Jr., were both gone when I made that choice. And I actually did try during our media mock draft to move back and get out. And I was going to move back and go back and maybe take another receiver. But at that point, I couldn't justify taking another receiver, and I couldn't justify taking another corner. I was pretty much, based on the way the draft fell last night, there were players that I really liked a lot that went right where I thought they would. I thought Amarius Mims would go. Based on what I saw, I was correct with the rest of the scouts by not being quite as high on Terry and Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry as they were. Or Cooper DeJean. The only thing I could really say last night that differs from the way that I feel is Drake May still went third, and I was just not a big Drake May fan. And Byron Murphy going 16, while it was true that he was probably going to go a little higher than people thought, I wasn't a huge fan, but matching him with the team and the people that chose him. I always said this. I said it's not just the players, it's the organization that you bring them into. Well, Seattle's perfect for him. And Mike McDonald, and all those guys in the personnel department and how they're going to go about their business in a very Baltimore-like way. That's a real good spot for him. I really do. I like what they've done up front with their ball club. But what to watch for with the Jaguars, watch all the guys that are still listed on the board that you don't think the Jaguars are very interested in. If I were you, now I'm gonna tell you what, Trent, they picked 23rd. They waited until the end of the first round to come in and speak to us. So somebody asked Trent last night, well, did you try to move back up? Do you ever think about moving back up into the second round? He says, how do you know I didn't try? Why do you think we came here so late? We had to wait till the round was over. So if that gives you any indication that they were trying to move back up into the second round, the first round last night, they may move up today. If they move up now, I'm going to tell you right now, the Jacksonville internet is going to break if they move up and take Johnny Newton. Because that's somebody that Jaguar fans wanted at 17. If they move up and take Johnny Newton to go along with Brian Thomas Jr., the internet's going to break. If they somehow manage to get up and get Max Melton, although if you can't get Melton, I would take Renardo Green in a heartbeat because he fits what they're trying to do. He's a straight man-to-man shooter. He can play inside, play outside. He can play press bail. He can play press man. He can do whatever you want him to do. He has decent size, 5'11", and he's scrappy. And probably played Malik Neighbors better than anybody did last year. So I think they'll go corner. They could go D tackle. They could also look to add edge depth. But I do believe they're going to probably attack the offensive line on day 3. And they may do it multiple times. They may address the offensive line multiple times on day 3, maybe in the 4th round. So it's going to be interesting. Pick 48 and pick 96 so far. And we'll see exactly what the Jacksonville Jaguars are able to do with day 2. So far, so good, though. Happy today. Just think I'll let y'all know that. Some people say I'm too negative. I'm not. I'm just negative when I'm supposed to be. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channel app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, you guys, make sure you take care of each other. Be watching. I'll be dropping maybe some clips over the weekend as the draft picks come in to keep you guys updated, give you my opinions on it. But enjoy day 2 and day 3 of the draft. The Jaguars got better yesterday. They absolutely did. You guys make sure you tap into Locked On Jaguars every single day because it's your team every day. And we always thank you for making us your first listen. Until next time, take care.